Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the YouTube show and podcast, None of Our Businesses, where we talk about the week's news in accounting, tax, finance, whatever comes up, all from accountants' perspectives. In this week's episode, we're talking about job searching on LinkedIn. How much actually gets done in the last 2 weeks of the year anyway? And we're also talking about Elon Musk and his ideas on CEOs wasting too much time on PowerPoint meetings, and are there too many MBAs running companies? We'll also be talking about why is the accounting industry just now getting into the business advantages of work from home and cloud computing. And finally, we'll round this session off with the physics of sandcastles. So with me as always, Mark Pallardy, Jack DiMatteo, AJ Wheeler.
How's it going?
And Charlie Zigmund.
Hi, everybody.
All right, well, let's kick off this round with Jack.
Yeah, I got an article here. It came up on LinkedIn, and it's something that seems to come up every year with job seekers. And the big question is whether or not you should suspend your job search during the holiday season. There probably is a time when I was said no, stay at it, see if you can. Don't set it down. But now that I've gotten a little bit, had a chance really to go back and look at it, I would almost say that, rather than sit there and try to talk to people who probably aren't in the office or aren't going to respond to you, there's probably more of a benefit because it's a very emotional time, trying time, that you're probably better served maybe shutting it down for 2 weeks and recharging and spending some time with some family and try to put it on the back burner. I guess if an offer is imminent, that would be a different story, but that's probably rarely the case around the holidays. I think you may be better off just shutting it down for 2 weeks and rejuvenating and, starting after the first of the year. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can just speak from personal experience, in my professional career, not much gets done, over the Thanksgiving holiday, and then roll it into, you probably have 3 solid weeks of work during December, because you got New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve. Kind of a lot of people take those days off and are not around unless you're working retail or in the restaurant business. But in my professional experience, not a lot of people are around. I mean, even just trying to schedule meetings with somebody around the holidays can be difficult. So I would say, if you're a job seeker, there's probably not much chance that you're, over that last 2 weeks of December or that last 2 weeks of November, you're probably not getting a lot of traction as far as like interviews or being able to get a hold of somebody. And especially this year with COVID, probably it would be just looking at it from a psychological standpoint, the people that you're interviewing with, they could have had a bad year, or, with the downturn in the economy, the company could have had a bad year. So it may be better to wait until Q1 of the next year to look for a job. But I mean, I guess it depends on your situation and I guess the business situation too. They could need somebody right away, especially if it's a seasonal kind of gig.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It just really depends on your situation. And I think a lot of the things like at the time that you decide not to do it, a lot of other people are kind of making that same decision. And so basically, if you're the one that stands out because everyone else wasn't sending in applications and you chose to, might be, a good thing there. But overall, I agree with you guys' points completely, is that everybody's out of the office and, it's going to be hard to get the traction you're used to at this time of year.
I've been seeing on LinkedIn, as a business owner, and particularly of an accounting business, I'm just getting like pinged by this horde of marketers who are like trying to get a call at year end to talk about how they can market accounting services, and some of them how they can grow your sales amazingly. Some of them are like how we can turn you into a 6-figure firm. I'm like, oh gosh, well, if I'm not a 6-figure firm at this point, that would be a problem. But it's it's kind of, but setting that aside, I mean, yeah, the thing about it, I don't want to discourage their spirit, because everyone, it's funny because they always start with, hey, do you want to connect? And then you connect, and then you get the sales pitch, right? And it's like, I'm open to connecting with them all. And even watching this, I don't want to discourage them from connecting. And who knows, maybe one day I will bite, but for the most part, I'm just having to ignore most of those messages because I'm getting several a day. I'm just floored by the volume of it. We've talked about this before to some extent, but the volume of it at year end, it makes me think, it relates to this conversation because it's happening at year end, and it's kind of like, okay, you've got a bunch of sales and marketing people that maybe are trying to hit some kind of quota before the end of the year, or they just think, well, this is the perfect time to get you set up for 2021. Maybe that's it. But I think the other piece of it, which I think we've hit on before, is just the sensibility of the marketing and sales industry that, well, accountants don't like to do marketing or sales, so they're like ripe for like hitting up for these kind of services. So it just seems like everybody, there's so many people with varying levels, varying degrees of experience, some that are clearly very underexperienced, kind of trying to be in this space of doing marketing and sales for accountants. It's just a weird thing. I don't think this was a thing 10, 20 years ago. I think it is a thing of the digital age that you have this whole category of marketing and sales people who are specifically setting out to do that for accountants. And yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon for my part.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I just want to piggyback. I think one of the factors to consider is how long you've been looking for work. And if you are somebody who's been in it for a while, I think taking off a little time to refresh and kind of get your bearings and maybe refocus on what you're looking for in the new year is a good idea. Piggybacking on what Charlie said, if businesses are looking, most aren't looking to do anything at the end of December, but if they are looking, putting yourself out there and just being available is a good idea. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is if you're collecting unemployment, make sure you're still looking for work, because they ask you that on your form. And nobody here is advocating that you don't be looking for work when you're on unemployment.
Yeah, good point. Good points, all. It's funny because if I've had that conversation once this week, I've had it 5 times about LinkedIn becoming more pitchy, where no sooner do you connect with somebody and it's in 3, 2, 1, here comes the pitch. So that's interesting. So Charlie, what do you have for us today?
All right. So yeah, I've got another article from the Wall Street Journal called "Elon Musk Advises CEOs to Stop Wasting Time on PowerPoint and Meetings." And so these are some quotes I thought were interesting to share. So he said, "Are CEOs in corporate America focused enough on product innovation? I think the answer is no." He also said that he decried business school graduates saying that there were too many MBAs running companies. And he basically takes the stance that corporate America's CEOs are too focused on having meetings and planning and not enough on actual product innovation. And so I want to get your guys' take on whether or not you agree with that stance, or is it maybe possible that those two things aren't as mutually exclusive as you might think? What do you guys think about that?
Say 100%. I agree with you, Elon, on less PowerPoint meetings. That I'm totally on board. But I also agree, kind of with the hint and the question that you asked, Charlie. That doesn't necessarily mean you need less MBAs. I think that we've heard this kind of talk before of like beating up on business school graduates as being not helpful to the business because they're too ivory tower, and they're not product focused or customer focused, and you really just need somebody who is specific to the business. And having seen so many poorly run businesses, I'm kind of sensitive to the argument of you don't need to know how to run a business, you just need to know your product. So I think that having a great product and amazing cash flow kind of can cure a lot of stuff, but it's also kind of helpful to know how to run a business. So I'd say there's value to those MBA folks out there too. And it's not mutually exclusive to the point that you should focus on your product and not so much on PowerPoint meetings.
But I think one of the interesting things that have come up lately, and when I say lately, within the last 10 to 15 years, is kind of the marriage of the MBA graduate and then the creative types, I guess, and like the explosion of internet marketing and kind of YouTube success and stuff. I think you see a lot of, I think of like somebody we talk about on the show a lot, like Gary Vee. where if you're in that creative space, I think having a team of like professionals, I guess business savvy MBA types, knowledgeable in that sense, and then having a really creative, maybe non-degreed, kind of area that can come up with the ideas that are going to make a difference and move the needle in what essentially is a large digital economy now, an economy of clicks, I think is vital. But I think, you're right. You can't build a business off of just click. Well, I guess you could, but to be more successful, I think you need people that know what they're doing there and have been through the trenches before. So I think, like anything, diversity of thought and diversity of people helps in this situation. And if you're getting information from both sides of that equation, I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think if we just keep in mind who it's coming from, this is Elon Musk, and his quote is one of his quotes is spend less time on finance. Well, not everybody has the capacity to, if they're running low on cash, create a flamethrower or start a boring company. It's spending time on finance and making sure that you have the cash to continue operating is critical for especially startups and new businesses.
Yeah, 100% on what Mark just said. And I kind of want to circle back to that point and reiterate that you don't have a business without product market fit and sales. So of course, that is what's most important compared to finance or administration or, the things that, perhaps he's alluding to with talking, using the term MBAs. But I think what it comes down to is, you don't know the path you haven't taken. You don't know what you're missing that you don't know, right? And that's the thing, is that if you have a great product and you have great product market fit and great cash flow, you're doing well, but you don't actually know how much you're wasting by not optimizing the business processes with the knowledge of how you run a business, with the experience and the knowledge of how to run a better business. And so that's the issue. And I think it's one of those things that's always unproven, because if you are otherwise successful and have produced a ton of cash flow, you've got a great product market fit, you've got a great product, you ring the bell for success. And how do you ever know that you could have been even more successful had the well-researched business principles been applied? You don't know. And it doesn't come up. And that's the thing, is that it's when you have these conversations, you're arguing against something that is an unknown. And so it's easy to say, oh, well, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is product and sales. Yeah. I mean, that is what matters the most, for sure. No doubt about it.
It's funny too, and yes, and yes, because I mean, you go to, there's nothing worse than a corporate America meeting that has no agenda, because it's probably going to be 10 to 20 people sitting in a room or on a Zoom call, completely wasting their time. Now, it's interesting though. I think some of this stuff goes back to the type of culture you have. So I've seen, large corporate America hire NBAs to do lead schedules, which should absolutely bore them to death. But a lot of times they want to make sure that the staffing's in place, that on their very worst day, they're going to be able to perform that task. So a lot of it, maybe it comes with culture. Just because you have NBAs, he sees that as a handicap. That's not necessarily so. I would think that I have some highly educated people, and I would want to nurture that and encourage them to use that brain power to work on things like product innovation. A lot of times in corporate America, thinking outside the box, being entrepreneurial, it's not rewarded in corporate America, and you really kind of stifle those people. But he's absolutely right with the product innovation. If Kodak, Xerox. I mean, they were household names at one time. And look at Chrysler. Chrysler wouldn't listen to back in the 70s and kept on building land yachts that eventually basically almost bankrupted them. So I think he's onto a lot of good points. But yeah, I don't think you can just disparage somebody because they're an MBA. I think it's up to management to put them in a position where they can provide the most value.
I agree completely. All right, AJ, do you have another article we can talk about?
Yeah, actually, mine comes from Bloomberg Tax, and it's titled "Why the Tech Revolution in Accounting is Only Just Starting." So she talks about COVID-19, forcing many people, including accountants, to work from home at least part time, and going into the new year. We've talked about this on the podcast before. That's working from home at least part of the time is probably going to be the new norm, even after the pandemic lifts. So a couple of key points from her article. Cloud software in the accounting sector is now slated for large-scale growth at a compound annual growth rate of 8.5%. And that's from 2019 to 2025. That was a study that was probably done before the pandemic. And so as tech adoption in accounting continues to pick up pace, the rising stars of the future will need to be highly versed in how these new technologies function. And according to those within the accounting industry, old ways are being overtaken with tech skills being the most important competencies of new hires. And also, so she finishes up the article by saying that the sector has to adapt to the new cloud ways of working quickly, and you should keep a close eye on new technologies to integrate into the working process and be more efficient, agile ways of working ahead of the curve. And cybersecurity is always a concern. And so she finishes up the article by saying the world of accounting is in a moment of evolution. Companies must adapt to survive in a new business landscape. The industry is newly fortified with companies that manage the transition, set to emerge fitter and stronger than ever. So I'd kind of like to get your guys' take. Do you think, when we've talked about it on the podcast before, where that we think really the pandemic is an accelerator for these technologies being overtaken, but I'm wondering if maybe there's some people stuck in their old ways that want to stick with pen and paper. So I'd kind of like to get your guys' take on it.
I think the idea that she's putting forward is, in the substance of it is right. I think the way she's framed it and married it lacks historical perspective. So, and so what I mean by that is to say that accounting is behind in technology. That's just wrong. I mean, accounting has been at the forefront of technology from the beginning. The first applications of some of the business computing processing was for payroll and costing and things like that. And that's always been the case, that accounting has been at the forefront of the use of technology in business environments for the most part. And so, and I don't think that's what she really meant. I think saying that accounting is behind in technology, that's not really what she was getting at. What she was really getting at is this cultural issue of accounting is behind in using technology for work at home process and cloud processing, and get businesses getting the advantage of work at home processes. And I think that is 100% right, that as an industry, because of the conservative nature, and we know those firms and those accountants who can't imagine how they're going to supervise or work with their people if they're not in person. I've heard it. I've been in meetings with other senior, very high, partners and heads of accounting departments who've made that kind of statement of, well, how am I possibly going to train or mentor the people in my office if we're not in the same room together? And to me, that idea is so foreign because we do it so naturally ourselves through technology. But I think that's the exact piece that I think that the meat of the article is getting at, is that the use of technology to get the business advantage of work at home process and cloud accounting has been somewhat behind in that aspect. And I would agree with that. But I think it's the wrong headline to say that accounting is behind in the use of technology. That for sure is not the case. It's this work at home issue, which is a very particular, narrow kind of application of technology. And I think that is a cultural bias in our industry that we see with some folks that feel like they can't manage without having their people kind of around them, that they can poke their head in the door or they can go stand over their shoulder kind of thing.
Well, and let's be honest, it's not a coincidence that a lot of businesses don't choose to immediately adapt to whatever new technology comes out, because the truth is that it's once you have a process up and running and a software tool going and you have built all your procedures and training around it, it's very difficult to want to get the business on board to want to migrate to something, even when it's obviously better. They often don't like the change element of it. And so ultimately I disagree with that, but I can totally understand where that comes from, because it's this feeling of feeling like they own the process and they know how it works. And so change is a lot harder to accept in the arena of accounting than it would be in, say, if you listen to, music through a music player and you download a new one, there's no big deal. You use the newest, greatest tool because it's easy. But in accounting, I can just see, there's a lot of kind of barriers that make it difficult to migrate to new changes.
Yeah, and another point, just kind of a side shoot of that I've been finding recently, is that training is so much easier in an online component, because I have had many a job where I have sat behind a CFO and watched what they're doing on their monitors and watched them click into different Excel cells and try to explain a process to me. And then I've had the online remote situation where you're sharing a screen, you can actually see what's going on, you can actually take control of the screen and try some of the processes with somebody watching with you directly. And it's just in a small way like that, I think the ability to have oversight of people who need training, or the ability to just show somebody what your process is so that they can contribute to making a better process, we're ripe for it, and it's just going to keep getting better and better. And I'm excited for the future that it holds. And I really like Ty's point that accounting has been kind of at the forefront of technology. I always think about the military applications coming first and then the pornography applications coming second. But I never thought that, accounting was right there at the forefront. It's the triumvirate. So with that, I guess I have the last article. My article is from Ars Technica. This is just kind of a fun one. Physicists have solved a 150-year-old mystery of the equation governing Sandcastle physics. So I thought, as you all decide to take your remote accounting work to Hawaii, like we discussed last week, you're going to have a month there while you're quarantining, so you can practice your sandcastle physics. They've discovered that the perfect sandcastle proportions is 1 pail of water to 8 pails of sand. And this article kind of goes into the physics behind this, and thinking about a sandcastle as each little bead, each little rock is governed by these bridges of water that connect them. And so they figured out this perfect ratio of like surface tension and water makes the best sandcastle at this 8-to-1 ratio. And I'm fairly science nerdy, but as I was reading about this guy who developed this, he's a Nobel Prize winner, and he developed a method to levitate a frog using magnets, or created a gecko sticky tape that he was able to put suspend a Spider-Man action figure on the wall indefinitely. I'm like, I want to sit down and have a drink with this guy, even though I don't drink. Any thoughts?
I mean, solving the important problems, how do we levitate frogs with magnets? I'm not sure. I'm glad somebody's on it and has a solution. Of course, it's 8-to-1 ratio on sand to water in the sandcastles. What did you guys think it was? All right, that's all I've got.
Yeah, I didn't. I was interested just in this. I did not realize this was a physics mystery. So good to know that one more physics mystery has been solved.
Yeah, I'll keep this in mind when I'm building sandcastles next time, or trying to stick a frog to my roof. That was it, right? We stick frogs to the roof. I don't know. Geckos, frogs. I don't know.
My kids are past sandcastle ages, so I guess I guess it's just a vital. I guess there's grandchildren. No, I'll have to at some point. I'll have to remember the ratio.
To be fair, Jack, is anybody really too old for sandcastles?
No. Well, you just have kids give you a reason to get down in the sand and build a sand.
As you get older, it's just harder to get back up.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of the None of Our Businesses podcast and YouTube show. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe. If you're actually listening to this on a podcast, we appreciate your 5-star ratings. If it's less than 5 stars, let us know. Give us some feedback, because we're always interested in what you have to say. Join us next time for more roundtable discussions about accounting, or about any stories from an accountant's perspective. See you next time.
Thanks for watching.